Good evening and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. We are here again tonight on a Wednesday night to try to bring you the most information we can about the COVID-19 crisis and what's going on in the news as well. Obviously, you can hear us on Sundays sometimes on Connections on Foxy 107, 104 with Val Atkinson and me, Ed Clark, as co-host. But tonight, this is another special episode of The Deal. And let's get right into it. I want to bring in our resident political science professor, Val Atkinson, to help us try to make sense of what's going on in the world. Val, welcome back to The Deal.
Thank you, Ed. Glad to be here.
Well, in the last few days, we've seen the numbers rise and the number of people that have died from COVID-19. New York had its worst day of the entire crisis so far. 750 odd people died yesterday. Things don't seem to be coming down in terms of numbers of people dying. There's been some signs that the numbers are coming down or at least flattening off in new cases because of the social distancing and some of those other things. Catch us up with what's going on and are things getting better or do we still got a long road ahead of us?
Ed, I think we still have a long road ahead and it's going to be tenuous as well. The thing that's passing for good news right now, and I don't want to get overly optimistic, is that the range or number of deaths has been lowered. It's estimated, and all of these were estimations. The estimation has moved down from 100,000 to about 60,000 now, if we do all the things that we're supposed to do in terms of death. So people think that that's wonderful news. But again, that's if we do the right things, all of the right things. So we're still in uncharted waters right now. We don't know. I think personally, the thing that is working that we should continue is the stay at home request.
Right.
If you don't have to leave, please don't leave. I think that may be the part that's working best of anything. But as far as COVID-19 is concerned, Ed, the one piece of news that I'm following that came out today and yesterday is how this pandemic seems to be affecting certain demographics of our society more so than some others.
Right.
And I speak of African Americans and Latinx people here in the United States that seems to be hit disproportionately hard.
Yeah.
But the answer to me is simple. If you talk about people that don't have access to health care, people that don't have very, very good education and then don't get good jobs and then don't have the resources to buy the right kinds of food and then don't live in housing areas that are conducive to making sure that you're not victims to environmental racism. And then on top of all of that, being exposed to other people who, because of a myriad of these kinds of things, don't take care of themselves. That puts you in a situation, and I'm thinking of the bus driver now, who, I feel sorry and I grieve for his family that have lost him because he was doing his job. He was trying to provide a service for the community. And then somebody comes on the bus and they sneeze or cough or whatever. And we don't know if it was a direct result of that, but he ends up uh, being positive for COVID-19 and he reached his demise.
Right.
Uh, Things of that, he didn't have a choice. He didn't have a choice between being a bus driver and being a broker on Wall Street. That
Yeah.
wasn't his.
Yeah, that was not the choice for him. I want to remind the folks you're listening to the deal with Ed Clark, and again, we're fortunate on Wednesday nights to have Val Atkinson with us. He's a former political science professor at North Carolina Central University, but also a published author with a number of books related to politics around voting and those kind of things. And we're talking about COVID-19 and this disparity between African Americans who are not faring well in this. The numbers are very sobering and should not make anybody feel comfortable about the trends. One of the things that is coming up later on the show, we should have an interview with Nicole McFarlane. She is at the English department at Fayetteville State University. She's Dr. Nicole Ashanti McFarlane. She's a PhD. But she wants to talk about her experience, Val, with just trying to get a COVID-19 test. I want to switch gears for just a second. I thought almost a month ago, the president said anybody who needed a test could get a test. And I've talked to Nicole offline, and we'll be talking to her online a little bit later. But she had the damnedest time getting a test, and she was very sick by the time she did get a test, and it took 11 days to get results back. And she seems to be recovered, but we'll find out when we talk to her a little bit later. What do you know about testing? Are we any better off than we were a month ago when the president refused to take the test from the WHO?
Well, we are about in the same place, Ed. I like to go back to the origins of why we lag so far behind other countries in testing. Donald Trump, in his infinite wisdom, knew that the numbers that could come out of testing would not look good for him. He always wanted, from the beginning, to play this as something that was just a tad above the common flu, and it was not a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
He did not want to be on the side that did a lot of testing and have the numbers shoot through the roof and go from several 100,000 people infected to several million infected. He thought those numbers would not look good for him right now, nor would they look good for his bid for re-election as president of the United States. So that was his motivation. And he won that battle because he refused to have testing to go forward. We have no idea how many people are positive in America. And we will never know, I don't think, as long as Donald Trump is president of the United States.
That's a shame. I mean, obviously, a lot of people have lost their lives. We've already approached, I guess, 13,000 people in the United States who have lost their lives, and that's just, it should be unacceptable to everybody. And I'm not sure, why it would be acceptable to any of us at this point. But the reality is I'm not going to pull any punches. I think it's been a dismal display of leadership by Donald Trump. He has not been able to manage this whole crisis. And so, Val, the latest thing that I'm concerned about, of the plethora of things to be concerned about, is we just talked about the disparity with African Americans. Now Trump is talking about withdrawing any funding for the World Health Organization, which is, how people get alerted to these things in the first place. Who alerted us in the first place? Who had a test that was available, but Donald Trump wanted to use the private sector? He sort of dismantled all of the sort of traditional ways that we handle things in the world. Because I mean, Ebola, and other SARS and MERS and all those things, they were effectively combated by working together with other countries. It seems like he just doesn't want to do that. What is his thing about the UN and organizations within the UN like WHO?
Well, Donald Trump has a penchant for striking back at anybody or anything that doesn't laud over him. And when a couple of officials from the World Health Organization said that they thought the United States was lagging in their effort to test, as we talked about earlier, Donald Trump saw that as a slap at him. And his history, his background will show he never supports or does anything in a positive nature for anything or anybody that does not say wonderful things about him. So the World Health Organization has become the latest Michael Atkinson. So this is Donald Trump's way of getting rid of the World Health Organization. He can't decide unilaterally that organization should not exist, but he can withhold funding. Right. And anything he wants to do to let those people know, I am not satisfied with your behavior. Right. And the only behavior that he is satisfied with, Ed, are people who fawn over him and tell him how wonderful he is, lie for him, help him evade the law, and do those kinds of things. Then you're all right under Trump. Right. But other than that, he will not support you.
Well, also we saw those pictures yesterday of folks in Wisconsin attempting to vote, exercise their right to vote, and then the president commenting that people should get out and vote, that he does not believe in absentee ballots, despite the fact that he uses them to vote, and that I think the Republicans have already let the cat out of the bag, that there's a concern that if there is absentee voting and more people vote and more people participate, the Republicans have no chance of winning. Let's switch to purely political here. Bernie Sanders has dropped out of the Democratic race. Joe Biden is, for all intents and purposes, the candidate that's going to be squaring off against Donald Trump, which may in this case be helpful because it gives him more time, right, to run against the president. But he has the disadvantage of not being able to run in the traditional way by holding rallies and those things. Talk to me about what's going to be happening since now Joe Biden can run directly against the president. What happens, though, because of COVID and not being able to campaign in the traditional way?
I think this is a plus, a positive for the Democratic Party and for all of those people that our president likes to call never Trumpers. Which I include myself in that group. It's a plus for us simply because I think Biden has the best chance of attracting a middle ground voters to vote for him and not be swayed to vote against the Democratic Party and for Donald Trump. So I think that was a plus. The thing that concerns me, though, in it all is the fact that Donald Trump has already gone out trying to sway Sanders supporters to come and vote for him. I mean, that is laughable, if nothing else. And he even let the cat out of the bag. Sometimes he tells the truth, believe it or not. He said, if you can't come out and vote for me, at least stay home and don't vote for anybody. And that is a strategy that his operatives and handlers know that they are working on. They would not like that to be voiced, over the media. Sure. But he has already said that, stay home. So the challenge for the Democratic Party is going to be, first of all, to get Biden in a position, in a place where he can attract the Bernie supporters and have them to go to the polls and support him, to do the groundwork leading up to the election, to do whatever it takes and treat Biden as though he were Sanders in terms of the volume, the amount of work that they do to secure his election. That's going to be the challenge, because just as there were Bernie supporters that did not vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016, I am saddened to say that there are a few, I think less, which is good, but there will be a few Sanders supporters that go to the poll and vote for senator, representative, governor, legislator, or whatever, and fail to put a check mark by the presidential candidate because they refuse to vote for anybody except Sanders. So I think that'll still be there, but I don't think to the extent that it was 4 years ago. And I expect Biden to prevail.
Well, I just hope you're right, Val. You were right the last time about Trump winning. I hope you're right this time about him not winning. In the time we got left here in this segment, I'm really not feeling all that confident, though, that all of the states will have worked out all the details on voting, because I just have a feeling that we're not going to be in the clear by the time we get to November. Things will be much better. I just want to reassure folks that way. I think from all the stuff we're hearing, we'll be better off. I'm not sure if we'll be back to the way we were before, which leads me to like we always do. We always tell people, try to do early voting anyway, right? Try to go when there's not a lot of people there in the first place. Try to take advantage of absentee balloting and all those kind of things. And I think in North Carolina, by having Roy Cooper as governor, we stand a little bit better chance. And we got a attorney general that's a Democrat as well. We stand a better chance of maybe not going through foolishness to try to vote. But the folks in Wisconsin is one of those states that may be the linchpin. Which brings me to your favorite subject right now. I know you've been looking at is the whole notion of the Electoral College, relevance of the Electoral College, and whether or not it still should be in place. Let's finish up this segment. Talk to me a little bit about what Wisconsin is going to mean in terms of the Electoral College and why we need some Electoral College reform or get rid of it altogether.
Well, Wisconsin has 10 Electoral College votes. And today's voting and times when the winner must garner 270 electoral college votes, 10 votes, sticks out as a lot, quite a bit. So they are very important. Wisconsin was one of the 3 states that totally collected 77,000 votes and enough electoral college votes to give the victory to Donald Trump the last time. Had Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania gone the other way, had 77,000 of those people turned their votes the other way, then Hillary Clinton would have won the election. So Wisconsin sits in the prime seat there to be determinative of what happens in the election of 2020. So we have to be very careful. The thing I worry about, Ed, is the big S, voter suppression. Because what happens is because some Democrats in major cities all live in the same geographical area, it's easy to gerrymander, it's easy to voter suppress, because all you got to do is change laws about where precincts are located. And where you're going to place faulty election machinery, and you put them in the precincts where people normally vote Democratic, and you divide precincts and set one on the other side of town, so people have got to get 2 and 3 bus transfers to get to their precinct to vote, and then you put faulty machines over there, so they got to stand in line. And the line could be wrapped around the block 2 or 3 times. That's voter suppression. Mm-hmm. That's how they do things to dissuade, to discourage people from participating in the electoral process.
Right.
And that's what I'm afraid they've always done, and they will do it again this time. Democrats are historically a step or 2 behind Republicans in stopping voter suppression. So things that we are doing now to make sure they don't move precincts or mess around with the time precincts can be open and that sort of thing. Republicans have gone beyond that. And the thing that they are going to do for this 2020 election, we probably won't find out about that until December of 2020, which will be too late. The election happens on November the 3rd.
Right. Yeah, man. You know what? It's so sobering. I mean, if we didn't have the COVID-19 thing to worry about, the economy is in shambles. People are probably going to have mortgage payments starting to show being behind next month. I anticipate probably that we'll see a spike in foreclosures like we saw during the last economic downturn during the Bush era. I expect that a lot more people are going to get sick. Unfortunately, one of the things that I've been really cognizant of is the few times that I've been in the grocery store, Val, I've made sure that I had on a mask because I'm worried about the people that are in the store. I went yesterday. I hadn't been in almost a week. I went yesterday and made sure I had on my mask. And there were so many young kids in there working, and there are a lot of young African American kids in the store that I went into. And all I could think about is they had no protection on. They had no masks. They had no gloves. You know, they were handling stuff that other people had handled. This particular grocery store, I won't mention it, but they did have up shields, you know, to protect them from folks maybe sneezing or whatever at the register. But that's despite the fact that, you know, person had handled things within the store. So I'm just afraid that we may see a spike. I saw a very sad story out of Maryland where a young lady, she had to go to work. She could not afford to stay at home. She doesn't have the luxury of working from home and sheltering in place and doing a Zoom meeting. She was a cashier at a grocery store at a Safeway or in Maryland, and she ended up having COVID, 27 years old, and passed away. And we're going to hear more stories like that. I just got a call right before we came on about a married couple in Detroit, a friend of a friend. Both have COVID-19 because both of them had to go to work out in Detroit, which is one of the hot spots right now, and we expect to see some really bad numbers out of Detroit. Well, Val Atkinson, we're going to take a break, and again, I appreciate you taking the time to come in and be our political science expert. And obviously, if you can be back with us on Sunday, I'd appreciate it if you could do that.
We'll do it, and you take care and really, really look out for yourself.
I appreciate it. And in the meantime, folks, stay with us. We're going to take a small break, and when we come back, it'll be Dr. Nicole McFarlane. She's at Fayetteville State University. She's going to tell us about her travails of trying to get a COVID-19 test, but she's also going to talk to us about disparities in health outcomes for African Americans. You're looking at The Deal. We'll be right back.
The census, a special time when we count every person in each home in every neighborhood.
Do kids count?
Of course, counting everyone in your home helps support your neighborhood by funding things like schools, hospitals, and buses. Complete the census by calling or going online, or return your form by mail.
It's easy, secure, and most important, it's totally private.
Make your family count!
This year, make sure every child counts. Visit 2020census.gov.
They have a mobile unit set up, okay? And I'm sitting in my car. I got out of the car, I showed them my prescription. Do you know they started surrounding me with sheriffs and people in white coats? I said, do it if you want to. I said, the provost of Fayetteville State University doesn't call me the notorious NIC for no reason.
Welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark, and we're talking all things COVID-19. And today I thought I'd have a guest that I'm hoping is going to bring us some perspective that we haven't talked about so far, which is testing in COVID-19. I saw a video of Dr. Nicole McFarlane. She's at Fayetteville State University. Let's go ahead and bring Dr. McFarlane in. Dr. McFarlane, welcome to the deal.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. I happened to see a video of you talking about your experience trying to be tested for COVID-19 on Facebook, and a couple of people that we know in common forwarded it to me, and it made me think about that whole experience. My sister went through a similar experience. She's down in Conway, South Carolina, and she had to go to a number of different places trying to get tested, and it took forever, and she could not get tested. Tell us about your experience with trying to get tested for COVID-19.
It began in early March when I contacted my primary care physician. I had a terrible fever. I was in a bed. I couldn't move. I was in a lot of pain. And she told, there was, right at that point, they said there was the basic protocol was to go to the ER. But then I was also getting, and that was Cumberland County protocol that she was getting, the information she was getting. But then I also was reading the national, the CDC information and the federal websites and listening to the news while I was, in bed with a fever and talking, texting to my family. And they said, don't go to the ER. That's the worst place you can go because you're going to, clog up the system, or you may even contract the virus if you don't have it. So I just stayed home and monitored my temperature. Right. Yeah, it was the second Friday of the month. So it was like right before St. Patrick's Day. And they told me that I should go get a flu test because before I could get a COVID-19 test, I would have to get a flu test. So I did go to my PCP. I was kind of angry. So I was like on the phone with her the whole time, like, it was like, I think it was Friday, and it was like 3:50 p.m., knowing that the office closes at 5 p.m. And I know my temperature was rising as I was driving because I was just like, don't close. I said, don't even think about it because I'm pulling up. And I mean, I was kind of, I was fever sick. And so I got there. And so she referred me to one of the other primary care physicians here in the area, close to the mall that used to be there. It's no longer there because of COVID-19. And they sent, and so I was in there, and there were a lot of people in there who were coughing. And they were quiet. The mood was particularly docile. There was, there were among the waiting room patients, but among the doctors, they seemed quite concerned, but also it was a mundane. It was just another day because they're used to seeing people sick. Right. They're used to seeing people in their worst days of their lives. So I got the B complex. I mean, I got the test, the flu test, and they had me waiting in the office, and then I started coughing, and I didn't have a face mask at that time.
So was that a prerequisite to get the test that you had to also take a flu test? So was that their protocol?
They had to eliminate. Yes, the protocol was to get an elimination for the flu test. So I went in there, and so I came back negative. But I knew something was wrong. I was like, at that point, doctors, the physician he inferred without quite saying it so directly, you could presume you have it. If you came up negative and you're experiencing these symptoms, presume you have it, continue to monitor your vitals. I was on social media at that time, Facebook, and I was watching it. And I was quite surprised. I'm not going to mention the doctor's name, of course, because that might compromise, privacy of some of their patients. And first of all, I was concerned if he was even in my network. And they told me that was a Friday. They said I'd have to come back on Monday after I tested negative. It took about 45 minutes for it to come back. And they told me I have to come back Monday with my insurance card because I didn't have it with me, or I was going to be charged out of network. So I went back there Monday and I got it. So at that point, I really started to the alarm sign. I think the stress of just that situation of not knowing if I had it or not really exacerbated my symptoms. So it was a week later and my temperature went right back up. My temperature went back up and I was knocked right back down. It was a week later. And I said, oh my goodness, this is crazy, because I thought I had beaten it. Because I was conducting for the rest of that week, that earlier those 2 days, that Monday and that Tuesday, I was conducting teleconference meetings with students all week. So I was doing a lot of talking and I was losing my voice. And my students bring out a lot of passion in me. So, probably my blood pressure was going up,
Right.
in a good way, right?
Yeah.
And so I was talking to them. And so by Wednesday, I was right back in the same place. I was sick again. And so I went and I told my doctor, so that Tuesday, I remember I was talking to a student and I said, hold on, give me an hour. Because I was listening to WRAL, our local news station here in Fayetteville, in Raleigh-Durham area. And I heard that they were doing the test, and it was at 12 o'clock news. It was right after, one of my, the View comes on. And so I was listening to that and I was like, wait a second, they're doing the flu? So that's about a 6 mile, drive. So I could get there, I knew in about 5 minutes. So I drive up there and I kind of hear her saying, well, I'm on the way out the door and they're no longer giving the test. So I get up there to the Cumberland County State Department, Public Health, North Carolina Public Health Department. And they said it was gone. The mobile van was gone. They said, come back on Thursday. I showed them my COVID-19 test because I demanded that previous Monday a COVID-19 order on watermarked prescription, because that's what I had heard that was that Tuesday. So after that Wednesday, I got the watermark prescription as though it was like a scheduled substance. I don't, whatever that important prescription is. And so then that was a Wednesday. And so Thursday I was like, I'm going up there. I know they start at 9 and they end at 12, 3 hours only, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I got there at 8:46. I was the first person in line. And as I got up there, they were like, who are you? What are you doing here? You're not in the registry. Mind you, it was about another 30 minutes or 45 minutes before anyone was showing up to get tested.
So let me stop you for a second, because I want to first remind the folks you're watching the deal with Ed Clark, and I have PhD Dr. Nicole McFarlane. She teaches at Fayetteville State University, but she does more than teach. And we're going to talk about those kind of things a little bit later. But right now we're talking about her ordeal with just trying to get COVID-19 testing. And one of the things that's emerging in your story, doctor, is that you have a long CV. You're very educated. You know how to navigate the world or whatever. And this story is very unbelievable. And I can't even imagine somebody who can't navigate the world the way you can. So I think what's emerging here, from at least for me, is that the United States still does not have proper testing going on, that we don't know for sure how many people have this. And I guess to allow you to continue your story, but to ask a question, did you ever get a real answer as to whether or not you were actually sick with COVID-19?
Okay. So as I got there, let me tell you, I literally had to stage a direct action, because as I was getting there, hour by hour, minute by minute, they were changing the goalposts. They were moving. I had everything I needed by that Tuesday. And by the time I got there Wednesday, things had changed such that no one was able, I couldn't get a test. They wouldn't let me use the restroom. They wouldn't let me enter the building to use the restroom, although there were other patients going inside the bathroom. So I started, enacting the skill sets I've learned when I was a student activist, like during the period of apartheid and early police, 90s. And it was about, and I was just like, no, I'm getting a test, and I'm not gonna go anywhere until you're there. I was like, and I'll lay under this wheel if I have to. And I just kept, I forced them to call me Dr. McFarlane, because I felt that they were treating me like, I felt like that was my only leverage. And so I went online socially so that I could start leveraging my network. And so I think what was happening is I was there, and as I became more and more outraged they must have seen my Facebook media post and my tags. They started seeing the views ticking up, and they
I
saw
saw
the
that.
quality,
Right.
and they must have seen the quality of people who were watching and paying attention and saying, "Go, Nicole, you better get your test." And as I was going, so then I came, and then I noticed what happened was the public health director came out and started talking to me about philosophy all of a sudden. Well, let's talk about this from a philosophical standpoint. And the sheriff was like, my name is Bennett. I'm not doing anything illegal. And you know what? Whatever. So by then I'm on the line with my physician. I'm like, you know what? As quickly as my flexible spending account card swipes every time I come to the doctor for me and my family, that's how quickly that email PDF better get over to this public health department.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden things aren't moving quickly. There's no, you know, and I never mentioned the name of her practice. I wasn't trying to slander her business or trying to, because I understood she was in a pinch too. That she was, you know, my physician, it was in a difficult position because they were trying to discourage her and trying to dissuade her from giving me the things I needed to order the test. And they were telling me I did not exhibit the symptoms of a person with a test. And I was like, I'm jumping up and down. I'm screaming. I'm red in the face. This is how a toddler acts when they have a high temperature. You haven't even attempted to take my temperature. Give me my test. I'm an adult with a high temperature and I'm acting accordingly. And so I told them, and then they started handing out masks to everyone except for me. And then I said, I got you. Then I got real calm. I said, this is where I got you. I said, that is a violation of every public health protocol that exists. I said, you endangered your sheriff, your public health director, because I could be the possible vector for contagion for all you know, and you are not protecting them, and you left me out. So that's clear discrimination. And so at that point, after about 5 or 6 people had gone through the drive-through, like 10 to 15, sometimes 30, 45 minute stretches in between, I was finally allowed to get the test before I left. And it took 11 days. I called back immediately that following Monday. At least thought I would give them time because they were 5 days. I called Monday, and then they said it would be 11 days. And so I got the results this past Monday, and they said it was negative. But I'm like, well, yeah, I'm sure I'm negative now, but I need an antibody test at this point.
Right, sure. And I think that's the next stage of this is having antibody tests. So, I mean, I think clearly, again, you're well educated. You knew, what you were supposed to do. You tried to do it. And we're talking about Cumberland County, North Carolina, for folks who are just joining us. So this is Dr. Nicole McFarlane. She is at Fayetteville State University. She's talking about her experience with trying to be tested for COVID-19. To me, Dr. McFarlane, what it shows to me is that we still don't have adequate testing in the United States. You just got your results within the last, week. And the president has been saying that if you need a test, you can get a test. Everybody should be able to get a test. What kind of test did you get? Did you get the nasal swab test, or did you have a faster test?
No, it was the same exact test as the flu test. The flu test was all swab, and the flu test to me seemed more violent. I was particularly sick though, and it was brought out, and they said, "Oh yeah, we got a good specimen." It was a flu test, but it came back negative, so they knew I had something, but it just wasn't flu.
Right. And
so, like the week and a half later, when I got I also had a nasal swab test for the coronavirus, but I think I was probably I had become immune or inoculated to it, you know, because I was already sick.
Right.
But it was a swab test.
Wow, that's just incredible to me. Well, I guess it shouldn't be incredible to me because we don't have a nationalized testing protocol. I think every state, every county, every municipality is probably doing something different. And I think that's why the United States leads the world in cases and will soon lead, if not already lead the world in deaths related to COVID-19. So,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Because what I wanted to say is I'd like for you, after that experience, but also knowing what you've also done in the past as an activist and those kind of, Can you put it into
Well,
context?
I've worked of race.
Yeah, yeah, that's what
My
I'm.
activism
Yeah.
is in the area of politics, reproductive justice. So I've worked with Planned Parenthood, um, uh, um, si- uh, uh, Sister Song, which is a reproductive justice network for women of color. I've worked with Democracy of North Carolina, Democracy North Carolina, advocacy, North Carolina advocacy groups, just, anything that's sort of just canvassing, getting out the vote, anything having to do with reproductive health justice was particularly important to me because I lived in Africa. I have three children. I happen to have three adult children. I happened to live in Africa for a period of time, and I had the experience of visiting the Kaiser Permanente clinics there. And I remember being appalled. This is in 2002, late 2002, and being absolutely appalled by the conditions that I saw. People standing outside and waiting, and kind of just languishing out in the outdoors. Where as an American, I was used to the plush doctors' offices, the magazines laid out. But then when I got to Cumberland County, I saw the same circumstances when I had to get my test. So my reproductive, my area has been in just ensuring that women have an opportunity to choose what kind of they will be, when they will become a parent, and how they will become a parent. Not simply to prevent pregnancy or prevent births, but also to combat things like fertility. Reproductive justice in terms of if a woman wants to have reproductive fertility trials, for in vitro, that if that even a poor woman would have access like that if she is desperate,
Right.
and has this desperate desire. So I was really particularly because of how Black women are treated differently. I was also, I teach my classes. Vitamin D, the guidelines for, and we still, as the FDA, they still have this of career experiences, all things being equal, Black women have outrageously
About all the other things you do. We're going to take a small break, and when we come back, we'll finish up with Dr. Nicole McFarlane. We were talking about her experience in trying to get a COVID testing in Cumberland County, North Carolina. That didn't go so well, but it's indicative of some other problems that we have. I want to talk about racial disparity in healthcare. We're going to take a small break, and when we come back, we'll finish up with Dr. Nicole McFarlane.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others.
For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
Good evening, and welcome back to our final segment of the deal with Ed Clark. And of course, we've been talking all things COVID-19 today. These special Wednesday night episodes that we're doing, obviously we do our Sunday thing, but in light of the fact that there's so much news going on, you may be tired of it, but I think it's important to bring different voices that you maybe don't see. And what I'd like to do is to make sure that you hear these other voices and be able to interact with them. So we've been talking with PhD Dr. Nicole McFarlane, who's at Fayetteville State University. She is recounting her experiences with trying to just get testing for COVID-19, and it did not go so well. And I think that's saying it kindly. She was trying to work through Cumberland County health system, and just had the worst time trying to get tested. Let's bring Dr. McFarlane back in. Dr. McFarlane, welcome back to this final segment. So when we left, we were talking about your experience, and you finally did get results from your testing just a few days ago, but it wasn't easy to do. And we left kind of talking about how the system, in all ways, not just in healthcare, but just about everywhere, it's difficult for Black folks to get the kind of attention that everybody else does, and particularly in healthcare. And right now, this is a very dangerous situation. If you're not getting the same level of care, we already know, and there's been reports out already saying that there's a disproportionate number of African Americans who are dying from COVID-19. Let's put in your academic hat a little bit. Talk to me about, as from all your research, studying, whatever, about how Black folks, and then you can speak directly about Black women in particular, because you're a Black woman and you went through your own thing, how you're perceived when you go to get healthcare services, and what is that experience like across the board based on your research?
Well, I think it's true. That's one of the things about being a woman of color and being a Black woman is I realized that there are certain markers of status that I tend to have to exaggerate when I'm in these sorts of environments of, not, being like overly branded out or like logoed out, but definitely show that I'm not that I'm not just your average bear, that you're not going to just walk all over me, that I might, you may not know who I am, and you may not know who I belong to and who I'm in conversation with. And so I think that the disparities in health definitely mirror the same disparities. Are you still seeing me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. The health disparities are absolutely mirroring the types of disparities that I think we might start to see and recognize with education, distance education. And I think that's something that we need to watch out for, because this long distance education, one of the things it does is it has created like the early, I don't know if you remember those early days of the internet. It was presented as a utopia where everyone was equal. No longer, it doesn't matter if you're a woman or if you're a man or if you're Black or if you're white, because everyone's equal. It's an equalizing space, and everyone is the same, because then you can pretend you are, you could precariously play football or video games as a Black body, right, or you could precariously play Sims or Second Life as a white female body. So it doesn't matter. Everyone's the same. And so, there's no race, it was presented this type of utopia. And I was one of the first, I think, people, in the field that I come from as a PhD, which is Rhetorics, Communication, Information Design, to think about multimodal education and online pedagogies and say, let's pump the brakes on this. Let's not try to, let's not elide the reality of race and the represent and how access is still going to be key. Material access, whether that is experiential access and functional access, and what kind of access that necessarily translate to transformative access. So what I did notice at the point when I was looking really deeply into this, when this was early, like around the early 2000s into the mid 2000s, this is when you hear this statistic: Black women are more likely than any group to have a higher or college education. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a caveat to that they often leave out, is that they're online education and they're working in these for profit. They're going to college, but for these for profit, right, strip mall based universities, that use their tuition not for academic support systems and Title III, educational support, but instead what they're doing is they're using it for further advertising. It's like a Trump University, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. I was just
and
thinking
so
that.
so Black women are much more likely to get a college education because we know that we are much more likely to need a higher education because on top of our natural gifts, on top of our natural talents, on top of our networks, we're going to also need that credential, that piece of paper. So Black women are more likely to gain a online, a higher education, but that's the caveat is that they tend to be online distance education.
Mm-hmm.
And so Black women have for a very long time been at the forefront. And that's what I mean when I say Black women are the harbinger, and both the harbinger and the bellwethers for what we can see in store for everyone else. And so when we see how COVID-19 is seems to be disproportionately affecting Black people, because we've already had health conditions and it's usually the complications that are triggered by COVID-19 have gone unaddressed because of these disparities.
Yeah.
Now we see that these same disparities. Let's see what happens. In fact, I just spoke to one particular student. I'm not gonna. she became an education major. Do you know that because of everything that's happened, she's done everything she's supposed to do? They're telling her now she has to take every single class that she's done this semester, even though she's supposed to be doing it online and she's doing all the distance work, that there's a strong possibility that some counties, not all, but the particular county she's in, should I name it? Hope County?
Can.
Hope County is considering the idea of making this disproportionately high number of Black women they have completed all the requirements in terms of their classroom practicums and their classroom coursework and their everything, that after all this, that they're going to now refuse their practicum experience because they weren't able to finish out this semester. And I said, you know what? I think this could be fixed easily because I have a feeling that, you know how Black women also are also at the forefront of all the service and the care professions such as nursing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we have to start introducing things like lateral entry, even for education majors.
Sure.
And so that the students that were already doing their practicum and still taking their coursework, because let's face it, some of the older teachers who have been here for a long time, their health may be more fragile. And they may not be able to return to school.
They may not return at all, right? This may be the impetus for them not to return. You know what? We got about 5 minutes left. I want to make sure I cover some more ground, but I'm just going to go ahead and ask you right now if you can come back on another episode, because there's way too much for us to talk about because there's so many things going on in this last bit of time that we have for tonight. Like I said, I was looking at your CV, and it's incredible in length, in the degree of things that you've done and all that. Can you tell people a little, since you're going to be a returning guest, can you tell folks, where did you do your undergrad work? Where did you do your graduate work? And again, what research you're working on now?
So my undergraduate degree started very early in something like that. And I actually left school and married fairly young. I was a child bride. That's what I tell people. And I had 3 children, the loves of my life, and they really informed my entire professional life and my teaching and my research and my service. And so I finished my master's. Finished my bachelor's degree at UNC Charlotte in political science. Okay, I really did love political science. And so my area of expertise was urban politics and looking closely at TANF. At that point, AFDC, the old form of welfare. This was during the Clinton years. Okay, so I guess I'm dating myself, right? This is during the Clinton years, and they were making the switch over from aid to families to dependent children and temporary aid to needy families. And I also happened to be, while I was a college student and a mother, I happened to be a recipient of those particular services and was in the very, the sweep of those particular changes. And so I was very interested. So I did my political science I did some post-baccalaureate research in the area of Black women's experiences and attitudes towards voting. And that, I believe, was right before Ralph Nader spoiled the
2011
W. Bush and Gore thing.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal. And so then there were some years I taught. I was a visiting instructor at Guilford College for several years after. And I got my master's degree at North Carolina A&T State University. I went back as a master's student after having spent some time in Africa and living there after the post 9/11 years, which is when I had the experience of or the opportunity to visit the Kaiser Permanente, which actually is an aluminum company. A lot of people think of it as a health management organization, but it started as an aluminum company that was about realizing that, guess what? If we treat babies for like malaria and make sure they have good food, guess what? We make more money because their parents can show up to work.
Right.
Exactly. So this is where Kaiser Permanente comes from, for this aluminum company mining aluminum in the Upper Volta region of Ghana. So after I did that, I came back to the United States, and I came back with a fierce determination of understanding, because I spent a lot of time at the W.B. Du Bois Cultural Center in Accra. So I came back and I decided to come back to A&T as a master's student, because it happens to be the only HBCU with the African American English literature master's degree. And so I was really, really excited about that. And so I finished that degree. And then I taught for a few years as an visiting instructor at selected liberal arts colleges. And then I finally moved on, and I just said, you know what, I realized I was afraid of teaching I remember when I was at Guilford College as an English, they had these like old fashioned, like beautiful ivy towered
the columns and all that stuff, right?
Ivy on the walls, and these beautiful English classrooms, writing classrooms. Everyone sits in a circle. And one day I got assigned to the science building on Guilford College campus, and there were computers everywhere. And I was so freaked out. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the future. I'm terrified. Mm. And at that point, I resolved, I was like, the thing that I'm afraid of is the thing I know I have to do. And so I decided to throw my hat in the ring, and I decided to go to Clemson University, which is fascinating because that's the Confederate flagship, in case anybody didn't know, right? And so I decided to go even deeper into the belly of the beast. But it was a wonderful experience, because my cohorts and my the community of learners and teachers and researchers and scholars that I became part of was super open-minded and very cutting edge. And so that's where I got my PhD in rhetoric, communication, and information design, with a specialty in African American rhetoric, particularly visual rhetoric, and how African Americans preside over Blackness, and how we animate spaces, how we create spaces of color in the public sphere. Because I saw that everywhere I went in these really overwhelmingly white spaces, I tended to turn heads. I'm talking about dogs and babies and birds would pay attention, because I was wearing colors, right? That, I guess they weren't in style yet, because Black women, again, we tend to be the harbingers. We're the first ones. We're ahead of the curve. And so everywhere I went, I was like, I am just drawing so much attention. What am I doing? And I realized, it's the colors. It's me being a woman of color, and it's just also the way I wear color, the way I preside over color, the way I preside over Blackness. I change space. I change the shape of people's words. Right. The things they say, they will not say, because I'm in the room. And I announce the fact I'm in the room by just simply being there. And so I became really, so that's what I did my research on. And so I particularly focused on cuteness as a racial rhetoric, because cuteness is it's a funny thing, because it has to do with propinquity. You think about distance, because it's a spatial rhetoric, because it has to do with the word acute, which is a geometric term, geometry, as opposed to obtuse. Right. So acute is an athesis term where you drop the A and you change the stressor syllable of the word cute. It becomes acute, becomes cute. In fact, when we first start using the word cute, and it first starts to find itself into the American corpus of English language as apart from the word acute, It is because it is about being a sharp-tongued. It was a way of describing a sharp-tongued child or a sharp-tongued
So they
woman.
were being too cute?
Sharp.
They were being...
so yes, being cute.
Okay.
Or too cute.
Well,
right, and so
I'm gonna ask you to put a pin in it right there, because we're gonna have to duck out for tonight. However, I want to pick up this conversation on one of our episodes when we're not talking about COVID, because I think it's important, your research that you're doing, and I also want to talk to you again about this whole notion of whether or not distance learning is really accessible to African Americans, and then the kind of distance learning that a lot of African Americans get, is it worth the money that they're spending for it? Which is something that I've been concerned about for a long time, because all you got to do is turn on the right TV show, and there's a plethora of commercials around the for-profit universities, and whether or not those educations actually turn into real money on the back end, and whether or not people can make a living off of the education that they spent maybe $100,000 for in some cases. But in the meantime, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us and share your story, because I think it's important for people to know what you went through to try to get a COVID-19 test that is not easy, and they're not ubiquitous. It's not like what the president said at all. And I'm not just picking on him. It's just not available in Cumberland County or anywhere. And so so thanks again for being with us tonight.
Yeah, I wish I could just add one more thing. I don't know.
Sure, go right ahead.
I just want to say that when I want to think about the thing I want to say is that we want to think about the fact that we talk about Black women as, being cute. Black women have been saying for a long time, I'm gonna need 6 feet, right? That's a kind of way of saying something. But guess what? Now everybody
needs 6 feet.
Everybody needs 6 feet. But Black women have already been ahead of the curve. You understand? Because cuteness has to do with the visual rhetoric, how we look on the screen, but also it has to do with knowing how to make yourself fit into spaces that are not big enough. And maybe sometimes Black women have had to make themselves too smaller, because society's not ready for how great we are.
I hear you. Well, Dr. Nicole McFarlane, thanks you so much. And we'll be talking to you again within the coming weeks. And folks, you've been watching The Deal tonight with Ed Clark. And earlier on, we had the opportunity again to talk with Val Atkinson. He's a former professor of political science at North Carolina Central University, but he's also the host of Connections on Foxy 107, 104, and the Triangle. And obviously you can hear it from anywhere in the world, streaming online on Sundays. And I happen to co-host that show with Val Atkins on Sunday. We've been doing it I've been there for 25 years. Val's been there for 30. And we try to bring you information that's usable. We were lucky enough last week to have Congressman G.K. Butterfield in with us, and he's promised to come back. We've been trying to reach out to Alma Adams as well to have her on the show, and we should have her pretty soon. In the meantime, what I always tell you guys to do something useful this week. We'll be back on Sunday. We're working on some guests for Sunday. We want to continue this discussion about disparity in outcomes for African Americans with COVID-19. In the meantime, good night, and we'll see you next time. Bye.